Hi folks, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining me once again in this 2-week roundup where we look at all the games we've reviewed, well most of them, and try and put them in a top 6, which is quite often very difficult to do. Sometimes we agree on the order, sometimes we disagree, but it's all part of the fun based on retro memories and all that sort of guff. Now, a couple of homebrews on the ZX Spectrum I didn't include in the top 6 just to make it a bit easier for myself, but both of them are brilliant games. There's Archaeomania from 2014, which is a take on a Tetris game, which is pretty good and worth checking out. And also as well there was like a reskin of a ZX81 game called 3D Monster Maze. That was 2018, so this year, but they've made it colour as opposed to the black and white, and it really makes it stand out. So there are a couple of good games we quickly touched upon. Also in the top 6 which didn't actually make it, which are notable mentions, because a few of you might have had these in your top 6 as they're quite good. First one was on the Commodore Amiga. Again, a homebrew from 2016. It's a remake of the great Giant Sisters, trying to make it a little bit better. It's Giant Sisters Special Edition. Plays identical to the original game, all the original stages are there, but they've done a total overhaul on the graphics. The enemies look a bit different, the characters you control a bit more beefed up. Now, although that game is good, like I see, it's a definite improvement over the original. I think maybe they could have done a little bit more, and a few people in the comment section agreed as well. That's the sort of thing they were saying, but the music could have had a bit more to it and so forth. But it's a really nice addition. Offers a bit more, makes it look a little more attractive. When I first reviewed the Commodore 64 version of Great Giant Sisters, I was amazed at how close to the original Amiga version it was. It just showed the Amiga wasn't being really pushed that much, so it's good to see that one. We've been continuing reviewing Atari 2600 games, and some of those do feature in the top 6 this time, as I've sort of like got used to them to think what's good and what's bad. One that didn't make it, which is an absolutely brilliant game, they managed to get quite a lot onto the cartridge there, so again you might have that in your top 6, is Tapper by Sega from 1984, based on the arcade cabinet. Essentially you control this guy who must serve drinks to people by topping up the beer and sliding the beer glasses across the bar top. 1 beer glass per person. If you put too many beer glasses across, they will crash and you would lose a life. If one of the patrons in the bar gets to the end and you haven't fed them their drink, they will throw you across the bar top and you lose a life there. So it's like speed and skill, 4 different bars to go through, from Western ending up in the space bar. A nice level of difficulty about it, and there's lots to like about Tapper if you're into your gaming and you're into your beer. That one's 1984, from my favourite era really. And another one that didn't make it, which really might have done, looks very similar to Pinball Dreams on the Commodore Amiga and Pinball Fantasy, so that's pretty good to start off with. It was Psycho Pinball, published by Codemasters in 1994. So 3 good games that I could have included, but for whatever reason I didn't in the end, because I just like elements of other games a little bit better. But Psycho Pinball gives you 3 tables, and then there's a mode called Psycho Pinball which differentiates between the 3 depending on the gameplay and modes activated. It's quite nice to play that one, but I think there are better games we've had a look at. Now, before we actually do come to the top 6, the main meat of the sandwich, just going to look at the pinball games we reviewed. Come to the end of the line with the Pinball Arcade Season 7 as it then was. So we looked at Banzai Run. Now, it's an interesting table, but it isn't my favourite of the tables by a long shot. I think my favourite looking back over the season is Ghostbusters. But this one is okay, but what makes it really good is the game actually on the back glass. If I played this game in real life, I would have been, amazed by that. But once you get the ball to the end of the table up a certain ramp, a magnet picks it up, puts it to a mini game actually within the back glass, the vertical back glass of the table, and then you've got a pinball table up there. It's fast and frantic, that bit, and quite often you won't be lasting very long, but it's really good to see. Now, the Pinball Arcade going forward, they are releasing their tables separately. I think there's 3 I haven't done. Monies are going to be a little bit tight going forward, so we'll have to see how that goes, depending on the revenue of the channel and so forth. But, there we go. But we'll find other pinball tables to look at, I'm sure. Okie doke, so top 6 time. Right, here we go. So, in 6th place, on the Commodore 64, keep you guessing, It's Test Drive, published by Accolade in 1987. Now this is a game I first played on the Commodore Amiga. I really loved it on that, so I knew already I was perhaps going to like it on the Commodore 64 as well. It's set over 5 stages in the mountains. There's not much to it. A little bit frustrating at times, but you must get to the end of the stage, to the gas station, in the quickest time as possible and crash in as little as possible. If you crash too many times, it's game over. The oncoming traffic is a bit of a pain in this one, but it is a classic game and it plays really well. One of my favourite games of all time is Test Drive 2, so I'm always going to like this and Grand Prix Circuit, which I presume come out on the Commodore 64 as well. We'll have to track that down. You've got a choice of, I think it's 5 cars in this one, or at least it was in the Amiga version, so you can get a very bit of gameplay. Engine sounds don't differentiate too much between the cars, and the handling is pretty similar as well, but at least it gives a kid an impression that they're having a go at a different game. Now, in 5th place on the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, depending on where you are in the world, I put Pac-Mania by Tengen in 1991 and based on the arcade cabinet from 1987. I really like Pac-Man. Driving games on Pac-Man are probably my favourite types of games. They require the least bit of thinking. But Pac-Man has gone 3D. Really love this again on the Commodore Amiga. I had to review it on the Sega Mega Drive as I'm slowly getting familiar with that system, so there's going to be a bit of an overlap with the games I played in the past to try and introduce me onto that system. But Pac-Mania plays extremely well on this, just as good as the Commodore Amiga, although I slightly prefer the Commodore Amiga version, probably because I've got nostalgia goggles on. If I had the Sega Mega Drive back in today, that version, I'll probably like that one the best. But it's a number of different mazes, starting from Block Town, not to be called Lego Town because of copyright, then Sandbox, various other ones, and then ending up on jungly steps. The ghosts eventually jump. The sound on this is absolutely brilliant, plays really good, and there's lots to like about Pac-Mania. And in 4th place, I put a game which quite a lot to learn on this one. I wasn't very good in my gameplay, but the gameplays never are about that. It's about seeing what the game's like, how much more there is to learn, would you have come back to. On this one, I think I would have done. It's Starquake on the ZX Spectrum, published by Bubble Bus Software in 1985. Feels a lot like an Ultimate Play the game, which isn't a bad thing because a lot of those were classics, but this one's by Bubble Bus Software. You control a creature called a blob, some sort of biological life form. It's been sent up to this rogue planet. It's heading towards the Earth on a collision course, and by finding the central core and different objects and putting them in that core in the right place at the right time, you can avert disaster and the Earth getting destroyed. Now, it is random the game each time to a certain degree, so have you coming back. It's not the sort of game you can jump into like I did and complete it on your first go, because there's quite a lot to learn, quite a lot of nuances there, lifts and special powers. So in 6th place, I put Test Drive on the Commodore 64, published by Accolade in 1987. In 5th place, Pac-Mania by Tengen in 1991 on the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive. And in 4th place, I put Starquake on the ZX Spectrum, published by Bubble Bus Software in 1985. So what does that leave us in the top 3 then? I think one of them would all have the same. I'm not sure about the other 2. But you might have Tapper in there, who knows. But in 3rd place, on the Atari 2600, I put Hero by Activision in 1983. This game was reviewed through a recommendation, well, quite a few recommendations actually, maybe 4 or 5, so I knew it might be quite good. Also come out on the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum, which I'm quite keen to take a look at now. The gameplay is quite basic, but it's quite clever as well. I think it's going to play better on the Atari 2600 than anything else really. But you control this character, some sort of helicopter jetpack on his back. He must go down into a mine, go through various obstacles, blow up different walls, pick the right path, and rescue miners who have been stuck underground. Do have a look at the review because that plays better than I'm explaining it, but a really nice game, a good era of gaming from 1984, and quite often with retro gaming, the simple games I think work the best. Hero. In 2nd place, again on the Atari 2600, so that system's doing really well this week, so you can tell that I've really warmed to that, so thank you people that kept pushing me to have a look at it, is Pole Position by Atari in 1983, and based on the arcade cabinet from a year before. Now, Pole Position is an absolute classic game. It's one of the granddaddies, not quite as big as Space Invaders, but it's there, and it was to influence a whole load of games going forward up to modern day games. Gameplay is quite straightforward. You control a single car on a qualifying lap, And then if you qualify there, you go into the race where you must overtake certain cars and do laps in amount of time. Time going down all the time. As soon as that's gone, that's the end of the game, and that's pretty much it. But moves really fast. The opponents aren't that good graphics, to tell you the truth, but for 1983 it's a really good effort and really was to kickstart the gaming industry as well. 1983 in terms of racing games. Copied on a lot of other systems, that one. So, and in first place, after all that, you probably guess it a little bit with my nod to Test Drive on number 6. In number 1 is Test Drive 2 The Duel on the Sega Genesis Mega Drive by Accolade in 1989. Now, I was really impressed by this game. I've only recently realised it actually existed. One of my favourite games of all time on the Commodore Amiga, and for years I've argued I want more scenery discs because I want to play it more and more. Well, great stuff. The Sega Genesis Mega Drive game, the stages are, it plays very similar to the Amiga version, but the stages are different, so it's more or less getting a new scenery disc, and it adds really a lot to the depth of the game. You get a choice of 3 cars to drive in this one, as opposed to the 2 on the Amiga without the Supercars disc and the Muscle Cars disc. The extra car is a Lamborghini Diablo, I think, from memory. But it's pretty good. There's in-game music, which I'm not overly keen on, but you get used to that after a while. There's 3 different types of scenery: the Master, some sort of throw to the European. I still haven't done the desert stage yet, so I'll have to do that, but maybe not put it up as a recording. The video went on way much longer than I intended, which always proves that I'm really enjoying the game. But really worthy of first place. Test Drive 2 The Duel. I'm not sure if people would like it that were just brought up on the Sega system and not the Amiga, because it might be a bit slow for them, but for me, I was in absolute heaven playing that, so I had no choice but to put that at number 1. So in third place we had Hero on the Atari 2600, published by Activision in 1984. In second place, pole position, again on the Atari 2600 by Atari in 83. And at number 1, a well-deserved number 1, is Test Drive 2 The Duel by Accolade in 1989. Excellent stuff. So thank you again for looking at the videos. We try and keep this same amount of input, try and vary it much, or output I should say. Of course, if you've got a different top 6 or different top 3, then put those below. Until next time, take great care of yourself and a very fond goodbye.
Goodbye.